The cassette tape. Audio, video games, it was a versatile format, but it was slow as hell. Today, we're going to explore everything you've ever wanted to know about using tapes, tape images, and so much more right here on the Commodore 64 Ultimate. Stick around.
Let's go into the MonroeWorld.
Hi everyone, Shane R. Monroe here. If you grew up in the early days of the Commodore 64, or maybe over in Europe, the UK, you probably spent a lot of your existence using games on cassette. This one is so old, the label has fallen off. You can see some of the glue still on there, but this is Forbidden Forest, the very first game I ever purchased and owned. I bought it on cassette. It was 15 bucks at a Sears right outside of Spokane. That's how much I remember. That's how much it meant to me. So what we have here, this is an audio cassette, just like this is an audio cassette. There's really nothing special about these. These are typically shorter, use slightly higher quality tape usually than the run-of-the-mill audio tapes. And of course, they're mass produced, but it really is just an audio tape. So when we talk about TAP files on the Commodore 64 Ultimate, we're essentially talking about a recording about anywhere from a half a megabyte to 1.5 megabytes in size. They're pretty hefty. So you can download .tap images, but what's the point unless you're gonna write them back to a tape? Because there's faster disk versions, there's faster one-part versions. Typically speaking, the only reason you would ever want to use a .tap file, write it back to a tape and use it in a tape drive. We're gonna do all sorts of fun stuff today. So let's get started. Now, tape is slow. Everything about tape is slow. Reading tapes, recording tapes, loading TAP files. We're gonna be doing a lot of cutaways. Simply because otherwise this would be like a 10-hour video. So the first thing I'm gonna tell you right now, disable JiffyDOS, turn it off. Tape is not gonna play nice without it. Now I have here your standard Commodore Datasette. This is actually my second one. I found this out in the shed while I was looking around. I cleaned it up, cleaned the heads, and I figured I would use it for today's demo since I already packed up the other one. So that's kind of cool. This is one of the rare ones, believe it or not, because we're talking about tape trivia. There's a grounding cable. I've already wrapped it up and tie wrapped it, but there's a grounding cable that you're supposed to use to ground it, but nobody ever used it. In fact, everybody just cut it off. It's very rare to see a data set these days that still has one on there. But the Commodore 64 Ultimate does have a dedicated tape port. So when you say you've got a full-blown Commodore 64 here, they're not kidding. So let's talk about the TAP file format. So if I go in here, I take a look, I've got the game V, that, you know, the cool mini series with the lizard people and all that. This is 472K, so that's big. A floppy disk in comparison is 171 kilobytes. So this guy's pretty big, 4 times the size, because it's really sort of raw audio data that's on there. Now, if you were to hit enter on here, you'd see a few things. Enter index, not 100% sure what that does. Run the tape, write to tape, start tape, rename or delete. We're gonna skip a couple of these just because I'm not clear enough on what they do, but don't worry, we're gonna cover everything else. So if you wanted to run the game off of tape, right, the .tap file, you would just simply go down and run tape. Again, remember, you must have JiffyDOS turned off. Now listen closely. I'm gonna take my microphone here. What you hear. Now it just found V. Now it's gonna load that first game off the tape. In a moment. And the game continues to load. This takes forever. Now, with certain games, you would get some sort of a tape loader, like what you see here. Sometimes you'd get a little slideshow, you'd get some music. There's all sorts of possibilities. There were several different types of loaders. And if I remember, I'll put a link in the description down below to a really good video about tape loaders, tape formats, how they loaded, how all this stuff worked out. It's a lot better than anything that I could do. So this is going to take a really long time to load. I specifically remember the game Beachhead 2. When you would load it from cassette, a screen would come up and say, please wait 22.5 minutes for load. Now that's provided that your tape heads weren't dirty, your tape wasn't messed up, or maybe you had a bad bootleg that wasn't done well enough. You could have all sorts of misfortunes. But while we're letting this thing load, let's take a moment and talk about bootlegging, right? Now, these are audio cassettes, right? Is there anything to stop me from putting this in a dual cassette boombox and just copying it straight across? Absolutely not. In fact, it works very well. Now, can you use double speed duplication? Sometimes, depends on the source tape, depends on the quality of your destination. But typically speaking, you could use a boombox to copy one tape to another. Very simple, easy piracy. And I was gonna do that for this video, but I have a weird feeling this is gonna run a really long time. So we are loading V from a tape image off the internal memory. Later on, we're gonna load this game off of tape. We're also going to create a tape file out of this tape. We're gonna do a whole bunch of stuff, but let's get past this long load because this is gonna take forever. All right, now the game is loaded and we would be ready to play. So we have successfully loaded a tape image on the Commodore 64 storage into memory, and we can start playing. All right, so we've proved that we can load a tape file. What if we wanted to record Forbidden Forest here on the Ultimate 64? We want to rip our own copy, our legal archival backup. Stick this in. All right, so now what we're gonna do is take our buddy Forbidden Forest off of this commercial cassette, make an archival backup onto our Commodore 64 into the .tap format. F1, tape, sample tape to TAP. Give it a name, Forbidden. And start tape when back in the C64 screen. We're back, start the tape. So what are we doing here? It's just sitting here. Somewhere in the background, the audio of this tape is being sampled by the C64 Ultimate. It's then recording that audio into the .tap, or in this case, it's memory first before it writes to the TAP. And you can hear it right now. It's listening to the tape. Now, I would let the tape play all the way to the end. Once this tape stops, I'm gonna go in and finish the capture, but this is gonna be like 20 minutes. I'll be back. All right, the tape has stopped. Wow, was that long enough for you? Whew. Go back in, go to tape, finish recording to tape. Bam, tape capture has stopped. So what have we done here? We've captured the entire tape into a .tap file. Go back and in, 1.2 megabytes. So she's a pretty big one. Now we've already seen the .tap file load, so maybe we won't do that again. But what we can do, though, is we could write a game to a cassette from a .tap file. So let's do that. I have right here, this is a Maxell UR. This is a pretty standard cassette. There's nothing special about it. Earlier, I wrote a game to the front piece of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the counter so we know exactly where we started. And I'm going to write Forbidden Forest back to the tape at this location. So you can see we're part of the way through. I'm trying to remember what I wrote there. It might have been V, it might have been Forbidden Forest, I don't remember. But we're going to reset the tape so we know where we are on the tape. All you have to do now is write to tape. I know that sounds pretty easy, right? So write to tape, says press record and play on tape. And off it goes. Now you'll hear it again. It'll start squawking at you and it'll write to the tape. And when it's done though, it's gonna go back to the main screen. You'll probably need to come over and stop the tape yourself. So we're gonna have to kind of keep an eye on this to see when it's done. Now, I'm not gonna make you wait this whole time because this is going to take forever. So let's come back when it's done. All right, the fact that we return to the screen means that we are done. The tape does not stop on its own. We will stop the tape, and I'm going to make note of the recording at about 1:49. All right, so now you can see we filled not even the full tape yet. But again, I do warn you with peace and love, use a smaller tape, a higher quality tape, if you're going to commit yourself to doing tape stuff at all. Okay, we've read from a commercial tape. We've made it into a TAP file. We've written a TAP file back to a real tape. All right, so let's do a couple more things here and we'll call it a day. So let's say you have some one-part games, like something like Frogger here. Frogger is a single one-parter. It's a PRG file, pretty straightforward, right? So I've already loaded the game into memory. So I've loaded Frogger, it's sitting in memory. I could hit save and record it straight to the tape. That would be super easy. But what if I want to save this to the .tap file? Well, we can do that, all right? Hit F1, tape, capture, save, except we don't want to do it here. So let's go to the folder that we want to be in. Tapes, okay? F1, tape, save, capture, save to tape, or TAP file. What do you want to call it? Frogger. Okay, so now, as soon as I go back, it doesn't tell you anything, you just have to know. Now we're gonna do save Frogger. Now, notice I don't give it a drive number or anything, which means it's going to save to tape. Not saving to this tape though, I'm saving to the internal TAP file. Hear it going? Nope, there's nothing going on with the tape. So it's actually taking the program in memory and dumping it to a TAP file. You can hear it chewing away. And of course, this is going to take forever, so we'll come back and check on it in a minute. All right, well, that just took bloody forever. We've loaded it. And as you can see, Frogger worked just fine off of our copy off of tape. So pretty neat stuff. Now there's one last thing I want to show you before we kick out of here is if you go to your Commodore Ultimate menu and hit F2, not F1, F2, you will see that there's a tape settings right here. And there's two different playback rates. I'm not sure if that means playback by the source or playback from here. But if you end up having problems with your tape scenarios, change to the other one. Now, I know that like Forbidden Forest is an NTSC version. This is an American version of the Datasette. So I don't know how this affects things. But if you do have trouble, that's where you can find that setting to mess with. Listen, I hope you got something out of this. If you did, like, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment down below, and of course, hype the video if you happen to have that. Apparently, that's really affecting the algorithm right now. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.